The Tower of London is a well-known historic fortress and palace on the north bank of the River Thames. It was built in the 11th century following the invasion of 1066 by the Norman William the Conqueror as a symbol of his power and authority over England. It protected the River Thames from invasion and controlled the native Saxon population. He also built the White Tower, the oldest and most iconic part of the complex, painted white and made from stone imported from France. The tower was probably designed by Gundulf, the Bishop of Rochester, who was a skilled architect and a loyal supporter of William. Gundulf also rebuilt Rochester's castle and cathedral under William's instruction. The complex is also made up of other towers, such as the Bloody Tower, which was built by Henry III as a water gate to protect the entrance to the inner ward. It later became a prison and a place of torture and execution. It is notorious for being the site where the princes in the tower, Edward V and his brother Richard, were allegedly murdered by their uncle Richard in 1234. The bell tower dates from the end of the 12th century, making it the second oldest tower after the White Tower. It was built under the orders of King Richard I, also known as Richard the Lionheart, who reigned from 1189 to 1199. The bell tower has a circular shape and a conical roof, and it houses the bell used to signal the opening and closing of the gates and warn of emergencies. The bell tower is also famous for being the prison of several prominent figures such as Sir Thomas More, Elizabeth I and John Fisher. The Beauchamp Tower was built by Edward I as part of the inner defensive wall. It was used as a prison for high-ranking nobles and political prisoners, many of whom left graffiti on the walls. The most famous prisoners include John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, Lady Jane Grey, and Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex. The Wakefield Tower was built by Henry III as part of his royal palace. It was the site of the murder of Henry VI by Richard, Duke of Gloucester, later Richard III, in 1471. It now houses the medieval torture instruments and the rack, a device used to stretch and break the bones of prisoners. According to some sources, the Tower of London consists of 20 towers set within two concentric walls, built over 2.5 centuries. Some buildings have distinctive shapes such as the circular bell tower, the polygonal Beauchamp Tower, and the octagonal Wakefield Tower. These shapes reflect the different styles and functions of the buildings and the available space and materials. The Tower of London was used as a prison and a place of execution for many centuries. According to Wikipedia, 60 people were executed at the Tower of London, either on Tower Green or Tower Hill. Some of the most famous people who were executed at the Tower of London include Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, was beheaded on the 19th of May 1536 for charges of adultery, incest and treason. Thomas Cromwell, King Henry VIII's chief minister, was beheaded on 28th of July 1540 for charges of heresy, treason and corruption. Catherine Howard, the fifth wife of King Henry VIII, was beheaded on 13th of February 1542 for charges of adultery and treason. Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day Queen of England, was beheaded on the 12th of February 1554 for charges of treason after being deposed by Queen Mary I. Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, was beheaded on the 25th of February 1601 for charges of treason after leading a failed rebellion against Queen Elizabeth I. The last person to be executed at the Tower of London was Joseph Jacobs, a German spy who was shot by a firing squad on the 15th of August 1941 during the Second World War. The Tower of London has also been the site of several battles and sieges. Some of the most notable ones are the Siege of the Tower of London in 1460, during the Wars of the Roses, when the Yorkist forces captured the tower from the Lancastrians after a 17-day siege. During the English Civil War, the Siege of the Tower of London in 1642 was when the parliamentarian forces besieged the tower, which the Royalists held for 3 months. The siege ended with the surrender of the tower and the execution of its governor, Sir John Byron. During the Blitz in 1941, the tower was bombed by the German Luftwaffe, causing extensive damage to the buildings and killing several people, including 4 yeoman warders. The tower is also home to the Crown Jewels, part of the royal collection stored and displayed at the Tower of London, which have been protected since 1661. Beefeaters or yeoman warders ceremoniously protect them, the ceremonial guardians of the Tower of London. They were founded in 1485 by Henry VII to help guard the prisoners and the crown jewels in the tower. Today they also offer guided tours in Tudor-style uniforms, giving visitors information and caring for the ravens living in the tower. Ravens are kept in the Tower of London because of a legend that says if they ever leave, the kingdom and the tower will fall. The legend dates back to the 17th century when King Charles II ordered that the ravens be protected. The ravens are cared for by the Raven Master, who feeds them and trims their feathers to prevent them from flying away. The tower currently has 9 ravens. The only person who ever tried to steal the crown jewels was Colonel Thomas Blood, an Anglo-Irish adventurer and conspirator. He disguised himself as a clergyman and befriended the keeper of the jewels, Talbot Edwards, in 1671. He then returned with his accomplices and managed to grab the jewels under the metal grille that protected them. However, he was caught and arrested as he tried to escape from the Tower of London. Surprisingly, he was pardoned by King Charles II and even given a land grant. He died in 1680 and was buried in Westminster Abbey. He remains the only person who attempted to steal the crown jewels, now kept under armed guard by the army in the Jewel House. Today, the tower is probably London's most visited tourist site, but what of the quiet hours of the night, when the fortress becomes the haunting of some of its famous spectral inhabitants? The ghost of Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, who was beheaded on Tower Green in 1536, is said to appear as a headless figure, sometimes carrying her severed head, or as a procession of knights and ladies in Tudor costumes. She haunts the Queen's House, the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula, and the White Tower. The ghosts of the 2 young princes, Edward V and his brother Richard, who were declared illegitimate by their uncle, Richard III, who many believe were murdered on his orders. Their spirits are often heard giggling and playing in the tower, or seen holding hands and wearing white nightgowns. Lady Jane Grey's ghost is said to walk the battlements of the tower, while her also executed husband, Lord Guildford Dudley, is spotted weeping in Beauchamp Tower. At the time of her death, Jane was either 16 or 17 years old. The ghost of Guy Fawkes, the leader of the gunpowder plot to blow up the Parliament and kill King James I in 1605. He was captured and tortured in the Queen's house and later executed outside the tower. His screams of agony are sometimes heard in the council chamber, where he was interrogated. The ghost of a huge black bear that was part of the royal menagerie was kept in the tower by King Henry III in the 13th century. The bear died of unknown causes, and its spirit is said to terrify the guards and visitors near the Martin Tower. One guard reportedly died of fright after seeing the bear's apparition in 1816. Sir Walter Raleigh, the famous explorer and writer, was imprisoned in the Bloody Tower for 13 years by King James I. He was allowed to walk in the Raleigh Walk, a battlement near the tower, where he wrote his History of the World. His ghost is sometimes seen strolling along the walk or in his cell in the tower. There are many stories of people, ranging from staff and visitors, who have seen or felt the presence of ghosts in the Tower of London. There is the ghost of a white woman, who many people in the White Tower have spotted. Apparently, her presence is indicated by the overwhelming sweet smell of her perfume. No one knew who this ghost was, since no one had ever caught a full vision of her, as she was only seen in the corner of their eyes. Some of the most common experiences are hearing screams, moans, footsteps, or chains in the dark corridors and dungeons of the tower. Also, a feeling of a sudden chill, a suffocating sensation, or a touch on the shoulder or neck in some rooms or areas of the tower. There have been many tabloid newspaper reports of ghosts seen at the tower, and sadly many faked images too. But regardless, the Tower of London has an appeal for the paranormal seldom experienced to such an extent as at this location. and undoubtedly it will continue for many centuries to come. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this show. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this show, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and of course hit the bell icon for any fresh updates.